My name is Captain Bea Langley. I am 34 years old. I have been a signals officer for 10 years, and on a Wednesday afternoon in my first week at Harwick Base, I was in the base archive looking for records of my mother's service when I found a file I was not looking for. I had requested the posting to Harwick deliberately. My mother, Captain Anne Langley, had served here 30 years ago in the same role I now held. She had died 4 years ago. Coming to Harwick had been my way of being somewhere she had been, of standing in the same rooms, of understanding a part of her life she had spoken of with the particular warmth she reserved for things that had genuinely mattered. On Monday, my first day, Colonel Patricia Briggs had welcomed me and had said something that had stayed with me all week. She had said, "Your mother is still talked about here. She is the most decorated officer ever to have held your role. The station has had 60 years of signals officers, and none of them received the commendation she received." She had said it with genuine pride. I had felt genuine pride. And then, on Wednesday afternoon, I had found the file. The file. An internal incident report, filed in March 30 years ago. Reference number consistent with a training exercise that had gone wrong, a collapsed communications relay during a live field assessment that had left 12 personnel without contact in deteriorating weather conditions. The official account of how those 12 people had been found and brought in safely had been part of the base's institutional memory for 30 years. My mother had been credited with the decision that had located them. She had received her commendation for it. The incident report told a different story. Not a contradictory story. The facts of the incident were consistent, but the attribution was different. The report had been written by a Lieutenant Mark Pryor, who had been on the ground during the incident. He had documented with the particular precision of someone who understood the record mattered exactly who did what and in what order. The decision that had located the 12, the call to use an alternative frequency channel that no one else had thought of, made in the 40-second window before the weather closed the search entirely, had been made by a sergeant named Roy Dent. Not my mother. Roy Dent had been a signals NCO with 12 years of experience. He had been the most experienced person on the ground. He had made the call. Pryor had written it down. The official commendation had credited my mother. The handwritten note. It was filed with the incident report. A single page. My mother's handwriting. I knew it, the way I knew my own, the particular slant and spacing of it. She had written, "The attached report by Lieutenant Pryor provides an accurate account of the incident of 14 March. The decision referenced in paragraph 4 was made by Sergeant R. Dent, not by me. I am writing to request that Sergeant Dent's contribution be formally recognized and that the commendation recommendation be reviewed to reflect the correct attribution." She had signed it. She had dated it. 3 weeks after the incident. The note had been filed with the incident report, not routed to the commendations board. The incident report and the commendation recommendation ran on separate paperwork tracks through separate offices. The people awarding the commendation never saw her objection. They awarded it on the basis of the original recommendation, which had reached them correctly through its own channel. The note had gone into the incident file and had stayed there. The commendation had been awarded 6 months later. My mother had attended the ceremony. She had accepted the medal. She had carried it home. My mother had carried it for 30 years, knowing what it was and what it was not.
The object at the center of everything was the commendation itself, not the medal. I had seen the medal all my life. It had sat in a case on the shelf in her study, the way important things sit when they are both valued and complicated. She had never spoken about it in detail. She had deflected when I asked. I had read the deflection as modesty. I read it differently now. She had not deflected because she was modest. She had deflected because the commendation was not entirely hers, and she had known it, and she had tried to correct it and had not been heard, and then lived with the distance between what the record said and what had actually happened for 30 years. I sat in the archive room with the file and the note and thought about 30 years of that distance. I thought about the medal on the shelf. I thought about the particular way she had spoken of Harwick, warmly, yes, but with something underneath the warmth that I had never had language for. I had language for it now.
I want to pause here, because sitting in a base archive on a Wednesday afternoon, holding a handwritten note from my dead mother that said she had tried to correct the record and had not been heard 4 years after she died, 30 years after she wrote it, is the moment this story became something I had not expected when I requested this posting. I had come to Harwick to find her. I had found her. Not the version Colonel Briggs had described, something more complicated and more real. If you have ever found out something about a parent that made you understand them differently without making you love them less, drop a comment below and subscribe right now, because what I decided to do with the note and what happened when I found Roy Dent is the part I will carry for the rest of my career.
Roy Dent. He had left the Army after 10 years. He had been 42 at the time of the incident and 52 when he left. He was 72 now. I found him through the Regimental Association's contact records, his address listed, a landline number, the minimal footprint of a man who had not stayed connected to military life in any formal way. I wrote him a letter. 1 page. I told him who I was. I told him what I had found. I told him about the incident report and the handwritten note and the 30 years. He replied within 2 weeks. His handwriting was large and careful, like someone who had learned to write in a generation that taught it properly and had kept the habit. He said he had known about the commendation. He had been present when it was announced. He had not contested it. He had told himself that these things happened, that the credit went to the senior officer and that was how the institution worked, and that there was no point in fighting it. He said he had made his peace with it over the years. He said the 12 people had been brought in safely, and that was the thing that had mattered. And then he said something that I had not expected. He said, "I knew your mother tried. She told me herself 3 months after it happened. She told me she had put in a note and that nothing had come of it. She was angry about it. She was very direct about being angry about it. I told her to let it go. I told her I had let it go." He said, "She didn't let it go. I could tell she didn't let it go. She just couldn't fight it any further on her own."
Major Alan Frost. He handled commendations reviews in the Historical Records Division. I contacted him in the 3rd week after finding the file. The process for a historical commendation review was longer and more formal than I had expected. It required the submission of the original incident report, the supporting documentation, the handwritten note, and a formal request letter from a serving officer or next of kin. It required a panel review. It required, potentially, months. I submitted everything. I told Major Frost what I had and what I was asking for. He said the process would take time, but that the documentation I had provided was unusually complete for a historical review. He said, "A case with a contemporaneous incident report by an eyewitness officer, a formal note of objection from the decorated officer herself, and a living witness statement from the person in question was stronger than most historical reviews he had handled." He said, "It doesn't guarantee the outcome, but it is a serious submission."
The review. It took 5 months. The panel found that the incident report by Lieutenant Pryor was a credible contemporaneous account, and that the attribution in paragraph 4 was consistent with the available evidence. They found that my mother's note constituted a formal objection to the original commendation recommendation that should have been processed and had not been. They found that Sergeant Roy Dent's contribution had been materially under-recognized. Roy Dent was awarded a formal commendation for his role in the incident of 14th March 30 years ago. 72 years old, 30 years late. He did not attend a ceremony. He wrote to say he was not well enough for travel and that he was grateful, and that he was glad it was in the record now. The letter he sent to Major Frost's office was copied to me. At the bottom, in his large, careful handwriting, he had added a line that had not been part of the formal correspondence. He had written, "Tell her daughter her mother was the most honest officer I ever served alongside."
My mother's commendation. It was not withdrawn. The panel found that her role in the incident, coordinating the search operation, maintaining communications under difficult conditions, directing resources, had been genuinely commendable. The original commendation was annotated to reflect that the specific decision referenced in the original citation had been made by Sergeant Dent, and that the commendation was reissued to recognize her coordination role rather than the decision itself. The medal on the shelf in her study remains. My sister has it now. I asked her to keep it after our mother died. I told my sister what I had found, the full account, the incident report, the note, Roy Dent, the review. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "She tried." I said, "She tried and she wasn't heard and she carried it anyway." My sister said, "That sounds like her." It did. Here is what a Wednesday afternoon and a handwritten note taught me. The people we love carry things we do not always know about. My mother had stood in a room 30 years ago and watched a commendation be awarded for something that was not entirely hers and had tried to correct it and had not been heard. She had carried the gap between the record and the truth for 30 years. She had deflected questions about the medal with a quietness I had read as modesty, and that had been something more than modesty, the particular silence of a person who knows the full story and cannot fully tell it. I did not find what I came to Harwick looking for. I found something more true. She had not been the most decorated officer ever to hold my role in the way I had been told. She had been something better. She had been the officer who tried to give the decoration to the person who had earned it and had kept trying after she was not heard, and had finally, 30 years later, through a file in an archive and a daughter who went looking, been heard anyway. Roy Dent's commendation is in the record now, and the record of her trying is in the record too. Both are there. Both are hers. Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. And subscribe. I am here every week with a new story. She found the file her mother had left. She read what her mother had tried to do. She finished it.